In a bustling courthouse nestled in the heart of the city, Judge Evelyn Harper prepared for another long day of presiding over cases. The courtroom, with its tall, imposing walls and echoes of countless verdicts, was a second home to her. She had been a judge for over 15 years, and while her profession often demanded emotional distance, Evelyn never forgot the humanity behind the law. Her reputation was built on her fairness and integrity, traits that stemmed from a life shaped by hard work and an unyielding moral compass. The docket for the day was packed. Among the cases was a particularly intriguing one, a man named Daniel Cole, accused of embezzlement. Evelyn reviewed the file with her usual diligence, but something about the name tugged at her memory. Shaking it off as mere coincidence, she stepped into the courtroom, where the hum of whispered conversations came to a halt at her arrival. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Evelyn took her seat, the gavel's sharp crack silencing the room. As the defendant was led into the courtroom, Evelyn's eyes widened in disbelief. Standing before her was a man she hadn't seen in over 20 years, but could recognize instantly, Daniel Cole, her best friend from childhood. Memories flooded her mind, taking her back to the small town where they'd grown up. Back then, they had been inseparable, navigating the trials of adolescence together. They had dreamed big, vowing to escape their humble beginnings and make something of themselves. But life had taken them on drastically different paths, and they had lost touch. Evelyn's expression remained stoic, betraying none of the shock she felt inside. As the proceedings began, Daniel's lawyer detailed the charges. He was accused of embezzling significant sums from the non-profit organization he managed. The prosecution painted a grim picture of greed and betrayal, while Daniel's defense insisted on his innocence, claiming a lack of evidence and poor accounting practices as the source of the discrepancies. Throughout the trial, Evelyn maintained her professionalism, but she couldn't shake the memories of their shared past. She remembered Daniel as a kind, ambitious boy who had always stood up for what was right. Could this really be the same person accused of such a crime? During a recess, Evelyn retreated to her chambers, her mind racing. She opened a small wooden box she kept in her desk, filled with mementos from her childhood. Among them was a photo of her and Daniel, grinning ear to ear on the day they won a local science fair. She held the photo for a moment before placing it back, resolving to focus on the case. As the trial continued, Daniel took the stand in his own defense. He spoke with sincerity, explaining the financial struggles of the non-profit and his efforts to keep it afloat. His words were compelling, but the prosecution countered with damning evidence, forged signatures, and unexplained withdrawals. During cross-examination, Daniel's lawyer asked him about his upbringing. Daniel hesitated before speaking. "I grew up in a small town. My parents worked hard, but money was always tight. I learned early on the value of helping others, because so many people helped me. That's why I started the non-profit. I wanted to give back." Evelyn's heart ached at his words. She remembered how Daniel's family had struggled and how he had always been determined to rise above his circumstances. But could that determination have turned into desperation? As the trial neared its conclusion, the jury deliberated, and Evelyn prepared to deliver the sentence. The weight of her responsibility pressed heavily on her. That evening, she revisited the evidence, poring over every detail to ensure her decision would be just. The next morning, the jury returned with their verdict: guilty. Evelyn's stomach dropped, but she knew her duty. "Daniel Cole, the jury has found you guilty of embezzlement. Before I impose the sentence, do you have anything to say?" Daniel stood, his eyes meeting hers for the first time since the trial began. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady but emotional, "I'm not perfect, and I've made mistakes. But I never intended to harm anyone. I only wanted to help. If I failed, then I'll accept the consequences. But please know my actions were not out of greed." Evelyn nodded, her expression unreadable. She sentenced him to 5 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 2, citing mitigating circumstances and his contributions to the community. After the gavel fell, the courtroom began to clear, but Evelyn remained seated. Daniel was being escorted out when he turned back. "Evelyn," he said softly. It was the first time he had addressed her by name. "Thank you for being fair." She nodded, her voice catching as she replied, "Take care, Daniel." Weeks later, Evelyn received a letter from Daniel. In it, he reflected on his life and expressed gratitude for the second chance she had given him. He vowed to use his time in prison to reflect and rebuild, sharing that their shared past had reminded him of the person he wanted to be. Evelyn folded the letter, a tear slipping down her cheek. She placed it in the wooden box alongside their childhood photo, a poignant reminder of the complexities of justice and the enduring bonds of friendship. Share your thought in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to my channel. I pour my heart into crafting stories like this for you, and your support is the one helps me keep going. I appreciate having you on this journey,